Today, we're digging into a really powerful mental model. It's been used by everyone from ancient philosophers all the way to today's top physicists. We're talking about the art of thinking from the ground up.
So, have you ever just stopped and wondered how some people come up with these truly original breakthrough ideas? You know, the kind that completely shatters how everyone else thinks about something. Is it just a flash of genius? Or is it a method that anyone can learn?
Well, it turns out the answer lies in a technique called first principles thinking. And here's the key. It's not about just improving on what's already there. It's about tearing it all down and starting over from the absolute basics.
So how does it work? It's this incredibly powerful two-step process. First, you deconstruct. You break a problem down to its most basic, fundamental truths. And then you reconstruct. You build a new solution from scratch. Think of it like this. Imagine taking a car and completely disassembling it. I mean, piece by piece until all you have are piles of nuts, bolts, steel, and rubber. You're no longer seeing a car. You're just seeing its most fundamental components. It's only from that point that you can start reasoning your way up to a totally new design.
Okay, so that naturally leads to the big question. What exactly is a first principle? What are these foundational bricks of knowledge we keep talking about?
Officially, a first principle is a truth that's self-evident. You can't prove it by pointing to something else because it is the starting point. Think of it as an axiom. It's the solid ground you build every single other argument on top of.
And what's really cool is that this idea pops up everywhere. In philosophy, they might call it an a priori truth. Over in math and logic, they call it an axiom. It's the same idea behind Euclidean geometry, right? Where you can build hundreds of complex proofs from just a tiny handful of basic, unprovable statements.
Now, this hunt for foundational truths, it isn't some new fad. Nope, it's actually one of the oldest quests in all of intellectual history. So let's do a little time traveling and trace this idea back to the very beginning.
Our journey is going to start way back with the ancient Greeks. They were obsessed with finding the origin of everything. From there, we'll see how Aristotle turned that obsession into a formal system. And then we'll leap forward centuries to see how René Descartes used it to tear down and rebuild all of modern philosophy.
You know, the ancient Greeks even had a specific word for this, arche. It literally means beginning or origin. They were on a mission to find the one, single, ultimate substance that everything else in the entire universe was made of.
And these earliest philosophers, guys from what we call the Ionian school, they each had their own theory. You had Thales, who was convinced the arche was water. Then there was Anaximander, who proposed this boundless, infinite substance he called operon. His student, Anaximenes, argued it was actually air, believing it could transform into everything else we see.
But then along comes Aristotle, and he completely formalizes this search. He wasn't just looking for the physical stuff of the world, he was trying to find the foundational principles of knowledge itself, what he called the first basis from which a thing is known. Okay, now let's jump forward to the 17th century, because René Descartes comes along and takes this idea to a whole new, really extreme level. To find a truth that was absolutely 100% certain, he came up with his method of doubt. He systematically questioned everything he thought he knew, his senses, his memories, even whether he was actually real. This was the ultimate act of deconstruction. So, after doubting literally everything away, what was left? Just one single, undeniable truth. The very act of him doubting proved that he, the thinker, had to exist. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. That became his first principle. It was the one solid piece of ground he found. And from there, he could start to reconstruct all of knowledge.
But this powerful idea didn't just stay locked away in old philosophy books. It's actually having a massive modern renaissance in the world of science and engineering.
So you're probably wondering, how can I actually use this? Well, it's a pretty straightforward three-step process. First, you identify your current assumptions about something. 2, you break it down to its fundamental principles, the truths you absolutely cannot doubt. And 3, you build a new solution from scratch, using only those principles. It's exactly how innovators like Elon Musk reimagined space travel. He didn't just try to make rockets a little better, he asked, what are rockets made of, and what's the raw cost of those materials on the open market? And this exact process, it's a total cornerstone of theoretical physics. Instead of just tweaking existing models based on new data, scientists will often start right from the ground up. In fact, in physics, they even have a fancy Latin term for it, ab initio, which just means from the beginning.
An ab initio calculation uses only the established laws of physics, like the Schrödinger equation, without relying on any shortcuts or experimental assumptions. It is the purest form of reasoning from first principles.
All right, so we've traveled from ancient Greece all the way to modern physics. So what's the big takeaway here? Why should this ancient mental model matter to you and me right now?
Here's why it is such a game changer. Thinking from first principles helps you break free from just following the crowd. It unlocks real innovation because it shows you possibilities that other people who are just reasoning by analogy totally miss. And maybe most importantly, it forces you to truly, deeply understand a topic by wrestling with its fundamental truths.
Look, at the end of the day, most of us reason by analogy. We do something because it's kind of like something else we've seen before. First principles thinking is the antidote to that. It's the toolkit that lets you build your own understanding brick by foundational brick.
So I want to leave you with a challenge. Think about your work or your life and find just one truth that you take for granted. Then ask yourself, what would happen if you dared to break it all the way down to its first principles?